my name is Sarah Guerrero. I am a senior at the Advanced Learning Academy, and today I have the honor of talking to Lorenzo Gomez III, author of Tafolla Toro. Youth agency and voice requires self-discovery, recognizing your strengths, your opportunities, identifying your power. In a way, across all CAS schools, 9th grade is a year of self-discovery, the year of identity. For me, Tafolla Toro, in reading Tafolla Toro, through Lorenzo's stories, I was able to get to a place of finding myself, being myself, through telling the story of me. So what is the name of your book, and what is it about?
Sure. My name is Lorenzo Gomez III, and my book is called Tafolla Toro, 3 Years of Fear. And it's a mental health book about my 3 years in middle school, and it's like a little bit before and a little bit afterwards, but mostly the 3 years of middle school, and how, I struggled with fear and anxiety. And that was the theme of my middle school experience, was having these overwhelming feelings that I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't have any tools to deal with them. I wasn't confident enough to talk to anybody about them. So I just sort of carried them with me. And then, much later on in my adulthood, I started going to therapy, and just got some really good tools. Just like you go to the gym and you get some good exercises from a good coach, I got some great tools and exercises where I was finally able to deal with a lot of that fear and anxiety. And I had always wanted to write the book, and so I decided to do it. And now I had these tools to do it, and it was very therapeutic. I felt like I got so much closure by writing these stories, but writing them in a way to where it wasn't just me complaining. It was me writing it so that it could help someone else that was going through that experience. And that's what the book's about. And so it covers a lot of, things I dealt with just during that era, a lot of gang violence, drive-bys, bullying, just things in my family that I think a lot of people go through.
Right. So why do you think that it's important to share this story, of your middle school experience and the story of your book?
Well, I think I've come to realize that everybody has a story, and I think their story can help at least one other person. And what I have found since publishing the book is I think a lot of people have a very similar story, and most people don't want to go first and tell their story. And I think that one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was, I think if you go first, then it makes it a little bit easier for the people after you to tell their story. And so, which I was happy to do. And I think since I've published the book, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and tell me their version of the story, and just give me a lot of really good encouragement. I've had parents that have told me how much it helped them with their kids. I've had young people tell me how much it helped them not feel alone, and that someone else went through what they're dealing with. I've even had two people that I know in my network say, "Hey, your book encouraged me to schedule my first session with a therapist." And that was just so encouraging for me. And so I think it's important for people to share their stories, because someone else is dealing with what you're dealing with. And if you go first, it makes it easy for them to share. And so I wanted to share, and I also wanted to take away the stigma that might come with talking about feelings. I think that when you grow up, you're told not to talk about feelings, and I don't think that's useful. I think, I don't think you should talk about I don't think your feelings should control you, and letting, like the tail wag the dog. But I do think there's a healthy way to do it. And no one ever taught me what that healthy way was. And so I'm trying to put some of those lessons and tools in the book to help the future Lorenzo Gomez's deal with it. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to write it. And that's one of the reasons why, I think it's important, because you want someone to put themselves in the story and look back and go, well, how would I have done it? How would I do it differently? And then how can this help me if I'm going through it right now? And one of the things that I love, Sarah, is last year when you all, at the end of the event, read the first part of your letters. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was so inspiring to me and gave me goosebumps, because what you were doing was you were practicing what I paid thousands of dollars to a therapist to teach me. And so just the notion that you all had the tool, were using the tool, and it just came from a book, I think was really great, because now all of these other students watching go, oh, that's something I can do. an exercise that can actually help with some of these things I'm dealing with. And so I think that's really important.
For sure. So why would you say that why is it important for freshmen to talk about mental health?
Well, I would say it's important for freshmen, but I would also say it's important for anyone at any age, which is, I'm gonna compare mental health to nutrition and to working out your body. And I think that the sooner you learn how to exercise properly, right? When you go to a good coach and they'll tell you, man, your form's everything. If you have bad form, you're going to injure yourself, you're going to break something, you're going to strain something. So you need good form. In your diet, if you eat too much sugar, it leads to all these bad things, right? Diabetes and cancer. And so the younger you are, the sooner you learn those things, the better you can set yourself on a right path. And so I think it's the same thing with mental health. I think when you start talking about mental health, whether you're a freshman or you're in sixth grade or even in fifth grade, right, the more that you have tools to help you, the better off you are. And I'll give you one example. When I first started going to therapy, my therapist educated me on something called negative self-talk, which is whenever you say, oh, I missed that test, I'm so stupid, right? That's negative self-talk. I'm telling myself a story that's negative that literally is not true. And so if I say, oh, I missed a question on that test, I'm so stupid, my therapist would say, re-say that. And so I would say, well, in the past, I missed the answer to this test, this question to a test. And in the future, I'm going to study more so I can learn that. And I can study more. I can get a tutor. I can get a counselor. I can do all these things to get it. And that's a very different story than I'm stupid, right? Because now I've told myself I'm worthless and so that was a tool he gave me. He said, when you are talking negatively to yourself, you are going to depress yourself. You are going to believe these stories. And so I go, hey, that's super valuable no matter what age I am when I learned that. And I think that that's why it's so valuable for not only freshmen, but for any age person to pick up these tools like you would at the gym or like you would with your diet. The sooner you get them implemented, the better the benefits are. And it's like a tree. It grows and it bears fruit. And so you got to plant the seeds early. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yes. And how would you say that what was it like taking that first step? Or how did you get to the place to be able to realize that you needed therapy, or that you that was a spot that you needed to be for your mental health?
Oh, great question. I think so I'm going to practice what I preach. In the past, I have been very stubborn in my life with a lot of things. And so, I always say nobody makes it out of childhood without a couple of scars. And so, and the book shows you a lot of the things I dealt with. I just never dealt with them. And so I took a lot of my wounds, my troubles, my negative thinking into adulthood, which means I took it into work, took it into school, took it everywhere with me. And so eventually these things come out, they start affecting you. And the biggest turning point for me was several years ago, I went through a divorce. And before my divorce, I started going to therapy. I finally agreed to go to therapy. And I had two bad therapists that were just terrible. And then I had one therapist who taught me all the principles that I put in this book. His name is Marty. He's a really good guy. And so the big event that caused me was my divorce. And the reason I wanted to write the book was, I was 36 years old when I went through therapy, and I go, man, that's a lot of time I wasted. If I could give these tools to my former self, and which is why in the book I write to my former self. So I'm writing from 36-year-old Lorenzo to 12-year-old Lorenzo, because I really wish I could go back and give my 12-year-old self these tools, because I would have been so much better for it. And I would have been a little bit better prepared, and I would have been a little bit more confident. And so that stuff is really important. But that was the vent that triggered it, which was, my marriage was failing. I felt like a failure, and I needed help from someone who was a professional. And thankfully I found that. And also what I realized is I used to think that going to therapy was this really terrible thing. You grow up I used to watch the show called The Sopranos. It was a mafia show, and the main guy would walk to the therapist, and he didn't want anyone to know because they were like, "Oh, he's crazy, right? So he's gone crazy." And I just think that's crazy. You would never make fun of an NBA player for hiring a coach to help him with his three free throws or his 3-point shooting, right? And so why would we applaud an NBA player for hiring a coach to help him and not applaud people for hiring therapists to help them with their mental health? It's the same thing. And so that's the thing that I learned in therapy, and was one of the reasons I wrote the book.
So how hard was it to write a letter to yourself?
It's very it's very hard. So I'll tell you the quick story. In my therapy, one of the exercises that I had to do was I had to write a letter to my parents. And in the therapy session, you have to have a professional. So it's, if you want to try this at home, I would advise against it. You want to do it with a therapist. So you write a letter, and they give you a structure of what you want to write. And then you read it to a chair, an empty chair. So you don't read it to your parents, you read it to a chair. And so the letter goes something like this. It says, "Hey mom, I just want to thank you for what you did, helping me grow up. Here are the things that I'm really thankful for. And here's a couple of things that I'm not so thankful for. And, I wish you could have done this or that or that." And then at the end of it, the therapist walks you through saying, "Hey, but you know what? I'm an adult now. You tried your best. I don't need you to help me as an adult anymore, because I can take care of myself, and I'm going to take care of myself." And so the letter is a way for me to communicate these feelings I've had, get them out, but then tell myself I'm now going to take charge of Lorenzo Gomez. And I'll tell you right now, Sarah, when I did that letter in therapy, I did the one for my mom, one for my dad. I had boogers and tears. It was mocos everywhere. I was a slobbering mess, but I felt so great because that was the first day I felt like an adult. Like I actually took charge of myself. And actually, I have a pen where I engraved the date of that therapy session on it. And there's a story behind the pen that I'll tell later. And so for me, when I started writing the book, I had already done the letters to my parents. And so I had practice with writing a letter about something very emotional. And so I said, okay, well, let me do that to my younger self. What would I tell myself? And it's also easy because it makes me focus, saying, if I just have one letter for this topic, I got to make it count. It's got to be important. And so that was, the first one was a little bit awkward, but after that, it got real easy. And I think what helped me too is in the book, I have all this music that I did. I made a playlist on my Spotify. I actually have a Tafolla Toro playlist, and it has all the songs in the book that I would play when I was writing the letters to myself. And it would help me think back to those times in those early years, and then I would write the letters. And so I'd say the first one is a little bit hard, but honestly, even then it wasn't that hard. It was just, giving yourself permission to be vulnerable and raw. And once you do that, I think it just flows, or at least for me, it did.
What advice do you think you would give to someone who is afraid to make that first step towards therapy or towards having better mental health?
Well, I would say that, there's a couple ways. I always recommend that you talk to someone, and I think that who you choose to talk to about these things is very, very important. You want to talk to people that love you. They're not going to make fun of you. They're not going to assassinate your self-esteem if you tell them something, crazy. So I think everybody needs to look for that person that they can be vulnerable with. And that's a very, very special thing. If you're not ready to go to an adult, if you're not ready to go to your parents, if you're not ready to go to a therapist. But I would say that ultimately you want to go to someone skilled, just like, you can ask your friend to help you with free throws, but you really want a coach. You want someone who's a professional, right, to do those types of things for you. What I would also say, and this is why I was so inspired by CAST last year, was, I know that you all wrote letters to your middle school selves. Was that what it was? And I just think it's a great start, because you don't have to show that to anyone. You could write that and throw it away and burn it. But I think the practice of writing letters to your former self is a way to process your emotions in a healthy way, right? It's not, you don't have to post it online, just on a piece of paper. And if you want to burn it, that's your business. If you want to save it, that's your business. But I think those are also good steps, which is, and which is why I have so many letters in the book, is to show people examples. And you don't have to do it the way I did it, but I wanted to show people examples of how you could try to do it if you wanted. These are great questions, by the way.
Thank you. What do you think is the most important lesson in this story?
Oh, well, I think everyone has their own version of an answer to that question. The the most valuable lesson for me in Tafolla that I learned, at least for me, was the story I was telling myself was not true. And so and this is one of my big learnings with in mental health, is that you can tell yourself a story that might have a little bit of truth in it, but overall it's not true. And so I told myself all these stories when I was young that were just, maybe they had 1% truth in them, and the 99 was complete lies, complete nonsense. And that was the big learning for me, was how do I tell myself a new story, a story that's more true, versus, hey, the adults don't care about me, my parents don't care about me, right? That's not true. I told myself that was true, but it wasn't true. And or I told myself, hey, I'm really, I told myself I'm just terrible at math, I'm stupid, and that wasn't true either. And so I told myself all these stories, and it's like bricks in a wall. I put one brick on top of another, and soon I have this massive wall blocking me from all of the dreams and hopes that I have in my life. And so that was my big lesson in this journey, was what are the stories I tell myself, and how many of them are untrue, which is a lot of them, and then how do I tell a new story that makes it true, that helps me get past the things I want to do. And I think that's a lesson that we can all learn from.
Yeah. And I know that's something that I'm still working on, but I really I read your book, and I did enjoy the lessons that were in there. So I really think it's important for students to understand. So what's a fun fact that you can share about your book?
Oh, fun fact I can share about my book. Well, I'll give you a couple. First fun fact is I actually have a Spotify playlist that you can go follow, and it has all the songs from Tafolla in there. That's one fun fact. I actually have there's a story in there about my friends and I, the Cool Flannel Club, and how we dressed up as reservoir dogs on the last day of school, and I have a picture of it, and I can send it to you. I don't look anything. I have no beard. I look like I weigh 50 pounds. It's a whole different me. Another fun fact is when I finished writing that book, I drove 6 hours west of San Antonio into a place called Marfa. It's in the desert. And I was in a little Airstream, and that's where I finished writing the book, just so I could get away. And it has really bad cell phone service, so I couldn't check Instagram or anything. And so I went out into the desert to finish the book out there, and that's where I finished it. I'm trying to think. I think the other big little fun fact is I didn't let my mom read it till after it was published, and she was so mad because she kept telling me, "You better let me read the book." And so when she read it, she loved it. But I was so nervous she was going to get mad at me for some of the stories in there. But it was awesome. She really liked it. So those are a couple fun facts.
If you were to write this book again, what would you add to it?
If I were to write this book again, what would I add to it? I think every book gets to a point where I think that when you write a book, you always get to a point where you might change one or two little details, like, oh, maybe I would tell that story a little bit better, or maybe I would add this detail. But for the most part, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I think that if I were to change anything in the book, I would probably want to have a supplemental workbook. So I would probably want to say, hey, here's a workbook of potential letters you could write to yourself as an exercise right now, right? Here's the I'm angry and I'm fuming. I want revenge. I've been hurt, whatever, and let me write that letter out and just give some examples. And that's probably the only thing I would change is I would probably add a workbook that has all the topics that I covered in there and something that someone could work through with. But as far as the storytelling goes, I wouldn't change much. Actually, I'll tell you another fun fact for it is there's a woman in Italy, in Rome, who reached out to me, who's interested in buying the movie rights to my book so they could make a TV show of Tafolla. And so she emailed me last October, or since the pandemic. She's just waiting for her lawyer to get back. So I was so shocked when that happened. I was like, what? And she was like, oh yeah, I mean, this would make a really cool TV show. And so there's a couple of movie studios that we want to go, sell it to. So I still need to negotiate, if we want to do that or not. But I thought that was really interesting.
That's super interesting. Especially to know that it's not just reaching people here. It's not just for people in San Antonio, but also around the world.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I was super excited about it.
So if you had to, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I sent her the video of our interview, of the cast interview last week. So I'm sure she saw you on there.
If you had to choose a song that went with this book or this time in your life, what could it be?
Oh man. Well, so I'm going to look at my Spotify playlist right now, because this was the problem, is there were so many, I didn't know which one to choose from. I would say if I had to choose one of the songs from that book, it would be a tie between Under the Bridge by the Red Hot Chili Peppers or, because I'm a little bit more punk rock, The Story of My Life by Social Distortion. And I just remember I listened to them a lot when I was on the bus driving from my homeschool there. Like I can see the buildings passing by while I'm on the bus listening, to them. Like I can still feel it, as you're passing by. And I think that's what a good song does, is it launches a story in your head. And so those are two that I would pick from.
Yeah. So telling your story that was, I'm sure, the big step and a super courageous thing to do. What gave you the courage to be able to do that?
Well, a couple of things gave me the courage. I think the first one was going to therapy. You feel comfortable when you tell a story that you've never said before in your life and you speak it out into the universe. It just takes so much weight off you. You feel lighter, like, and so it becomes that much easier to say it again. So I think going through therapy really helped me out. I have a very supportive family. They've always been very encouraging for me. So I think that was another big thing. I go to church a lot, and my pastor, there's two people I dedicated the book to. One is my therapist and one is my pastor. And he's always been encouraging. And he was actually he was the one who sent me to therapy, my pastor. And so he was the one who sort of helped me. He was like my guide, my Gandalf in my journey in mental health. And he was the one that said, it's okay to go to therapy. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. And so I had so much encouragement from the people in my life. And also, because this was my second book, I had already written Cilantro Diaries. I had gone through the nervousness of putting a very personal book out there. And so I just felt, I felt like it wouldn't be that bad on the second one. So the first book just really gave me a lot of courage and boldness to do the second one. So I wasn't as afraid. But you're always afraid, because whenever you write a book or whenever you publish anything, whether it's a blog post, whether you're going to publish a blog post, whether it's an Instagram story, one of my mentors told me, he said, when you publish anything out there that's personal, someone in the world, in the universe, is going to say, that's dumb. And someone's going to say, I love it. That was super helpful for me. And you just got to know that both of those exist, and you just need to get over it and be okay with it. And it's the same thing with a book. Someone's going to read the book, and say, man, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And someone else is going to read it and say, hey, that was super helpful, man. I needed that at the time. And you got to be okay with both of them and just move on. And so because I had done that with Cilantro Diaries, I felt good. And it allowed me to do it even easier with the second one.
What advice would you give to people that are looking to share their stories the way that you have?
Well, I think Oh, wow, what a great question. I think a couple pieces of advice would be, the best story is the one that's true. And so I try to tell the story as close to identical as how I remember it. I don't want to make anything up. I don't want to exaggerate. The best story is the one that's true, how it happened. And also, people can tell when it's authentic. And so, if you write something that's authentically true to you, people will see it, and people will know if you're making it up. So that's the first thing. I also think that if you're telling your story, I think the first people you choose to tell it to, those are special people, and so just pick them wisely and make sure that they're people that you can be vulnerable around. Because when you tell a vulnerable story, you're exposing yourself, you're wide open, and the wrong person could use it and hurt you. And that's not what you want. You want to help people with it. And so who you pick to tell your story with, which is why I'm so happy that CAST is helping students with how to tell their story and have events like this that will really, shine a light on how important it is. And so, but I think that also there's several different ways to tell stories. Some people are going to do it in a voice recorder on their phone. Some people are going to do it on a podcast. Some people are going to do it on writing a Medium post. I'm going to do it in a book. Some people are going to do it on video on YouTube. There's no wrong way to tell a story. Some of my favorite stories are 2-minute long songs, or my favorite movie. And so I don't think there's a wrong way to tell a story. And I think that the more you tell it, the better you get at it. And so it's also another matter of practice. Is if you want to get in the storytelling business, you just have to tell lots of stories to lots of people, and eventually you'll get the knack for it. It's like public speaking. It's very, very scary. The more you do it, it's a skill. It's just like karate. The more reps you get, the better you get at it.
And this is my last question for you, but why do you think that it's important to tell your story?
Well, I think great question. So I think it's important to tell your story for a couple of reasons. I think the first one is that everybody has a story to tell, and I think so many people think not me, and actually the answer is yes, you. Your story can help at least one person in the universe, maybe more, but they need to hear your story. Your story is going to help them, and so I think it's important for people to help them. I think the other thing too is that stories are how human beings learn and teach. If you start at the cavemen, they passed information down through storytelling. That's how they got all of those things. If you look at the greatest pieces of literature that have survived thousands of years, they're simple stories, right? And so I think stories are how people communicate the best. It's how they remember. It's how they teach. It's how they learn, is through stories. And so I think storytelling is super critical. I'd also even say, if you want to change someone's mind, I would tell them a story. I wouldn't give them a fact. You can give them a fact in the story, but the story is what people are always going to remember. They're not going to remember the data. They're not going to remember how many zeros and ones. They're going to remember the story you tell, because human beings are wired to take in stories and consume them. And so I'm a big believer in stories because I've seen it actually work. And I'm so happy that you all are getting practice in storytelling, because you're going to be ahead of all your peers out there in the world.
Well, thank you, Lorenzo. I really appreciate you taking your time and answering these questions. It's really an important topic, and I'm super glad to have had the opportunity to talk to you about it.
The honor and privilege is all mine, Sarah. Thank you so much. These are such thoughtful questions. You can tell how hard you worked and how much thought you put into them. And so I just appreciate your hard work. Thank you.